and you'll get a cue on your screen to make sure that you are understanding that this session is being recorded. And welcome, I'm so glad to be with you all. My name is Hollister Thomas, and I am a friend of Sarah's and kind of a partner in some of the work that she's doing. I hope to be joining her more. I've joined some of the calls already that she's had for this cohort of individuals. And so I've seen some of your names before and some of your faces, but I've been kind of in the background. Today I'm in the foreground because I'm offering a workshop on communication. I thought I'm not going to know everybody, and that's okay with me, even though I've joined some of the sessions. But as a way to connect, it would just be fun to have anybody who's off camera, who's on camera, or has audio available, just to say good morning and where you're calling from, just so I can know your names and voices and faces a little bit more, connect them. And those of you who can't connect with video or audio, if you can just drop in the chat room that you're here and where you're calling from. And you know, everybody loves a good icebreaker. I am at a summer camp right now, so we do lots of icebreakers for kids and campers and counselors to get to know one another. And something that we talk about, like we try to think of creative ways to like get to know each other. One of the silly things that we do is offer, like, if you had a superpower, what would it be? So like not based on necessarily what you think you're good at, but like, what is a superpower that a superhero has that you would want to have? So let's just like try to have a little bit of fun on this evening, or early morning for me, late evening for some of you. So I'm going to ask anybody who wants to unmute, say who you are, where you're calling from, and what your superpower would be. Well, I'll start. I said I was Hollister. I don't live where I'm calling from, but I'm calling from Lebanon, Missouri, which is in the very middle of the United States. And I think if I had a superpower, it would be the ability to breathe underwater. I consider that a superpower. I don't know if it really is, but that's what I want to do. I want to be able to breathe underwater. And anybody else can go. We'll just popcorn.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Amrita from Kathmandu, Nepal. And if I had a superpower, then I would fly like a bird and reach all over the world.
Yes. Okay. That's definitely my number 2. Underwater or in the air. Nice to see you. Anyone else?
Hello. If I had superpower, then I would like to freeze the time.
Ooh, that's a good one. That is a good one.
Thank you.
Yes, nice to see you.
Thank you. You too.
Hello, I'm Ashwina from Kathmandu again. If I had a superpower, then I wish I could make a day of 48 hours.
Oh, that's a really good one. I need a day off. I haven't had a day off for months. 48 hours sounds great. Today I might get 3, so 48 sounds really good. Anyone else want to share before we get this party started? Well, we've already started the party, but before we get the presentation part of the party started. Okay, I'm going to get started. I know sometimes it's a quiet. Oh, hi. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Prakriti Punmagar. I am from Midwest part of Nepal. And if I had a superpower, I can meet you all right now, and we can organize a meeting physically.
I love it. So you're going to disrupt time and distance and get us all in the same space. That sounds like an incredible superpower. I think if we put all of our powers together, we would be an incredible team. So I'm so glad to be with you all this morning. I am going to share my screen for a lot of the time, and I have some notes. So I'm going to toggle back and forth between some notes and some screen time with you all. It's like a month ago, I'm going to say, Sarah got in touch with me and was like, hey, you've joined some of our calls, how would you like to present something? And I thought, what the heck do I have to present to you all? And she said, well, it'd be great if you could do something on communications. And I thought, well, that's interesting. My title for the organization that I work for is Head of Communications and Community Engagement. So both parts of my work involved communication. But I kind of felt inadequate. I'm like, well, that's not really my, I don't know if that's my skill sets. Even when I hired into this job that I'm doing right now, I didn't necessarily see myself as somebody who, I think of myself as a good communicator, but like to be head of communications, to be in charge of communicating publicly about the work that I'm doing for the organization that I work for, felt like a good challenge. And so it was a little bit beyond my comfort zone. So I stepped into it and have been working here for a few years now. So before I get too much further, today the session is called Communicating with Active Listening. And again, I said my name was Hollister. My name is Hollister Thomas. I am head of communications and community engagement for this beautiful nonprofit called Euphrates Institute. Euphrates is, before I tell you what Euphrates is, I'm going to tell you what we're doing today. Here's the order of events. We just did some welcome and introductions. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Euphrates. I'm going to talk about a little bit about the work that we do. And then we're going to pivot very gracefully into a discussion, a presentation on what the role of listening is in communications. We're going to talk about if we are good listeners, what we're going to find out, get a little test to do. I'm going to explore with you all listening at 3 levels. It's just a tool that you can use to think about listening as a form of communication. And then if possible, I don't know how everybody's connections are and if we're going to be able to stay on the whole time, don't know if we're going to run out of time. We might try an experiential exercise, a listening activity. And at the end, I want to give you some time called discovery time, which is just a new term that we've been using for questions and answers. I don't have answers, but I love to discover answers together. So it's an opportunity for us to have a conversation if time allows, and if there are questions or ideas that you would like to discuss. So with that, I think what's helpful is to know a little bit of the background of why I'm here and coming into this space with you all. And to do that, it seems like it'd be helpful for you to know a little bit about Euphrates. On the screen, you'll see lots of words on lots of the slides that I have for you all today. And that's really because I know there's so many people that watch this afterwards. And so I wanted to make sure that I captured these visually. And sometimes with English as not your primary language, it's easier to read something than it is to hear. And I often speak very quickly. I'll try to be as slow as possible, but I do know I often speak quickly. So the history of Euphrates actually happens to be somebody who I was in school with. Her name is Janessa Gans-Wilder. She's the founder and not currently the CEO. It says that on the screen. That's a mistake. She's no longer the CEO of Euphrates, but she's closely connected. She's like founder emeritus. She's always with us in conversation and dialogue. She's a big, our number one fan, but Janessa Gans-Wilder was working on a military base in Fallujah, Iraq. That was years ago when there was a battle between the US Marines and Iraqi insurgents. If anybody remembers that part of history, I do as a US citizen remember that time, and there was a ton of tension. She was there on assignment and had a moment where she was feeling a sense of conflict about who she was and what she was doing there. She went for a run on the banks of the Euphrates River and had this moment where she knew about the chaos and destruction that was happening alongside her, but also was witnessing this calm, beautiful, uninterrupted flow of water, all this life-giving source. And so she looked at that and thought, how can these two scenes be so different? She knew what was happening in Fallujah, and yet the river surged on. It was untouched. It was unstopped by all the chaos and death and destruction that she had witnessed and the world was witnessing all around it. But the river was there, still bringing life, sustenance, and hope into that desert space, into that space of chaos. So at that moment, she had a decision to make, and she shifted her trajectory of the assignment she was focused on was a little bit more involved with like the Iraqi insurgents and bringing down terrorism. she shifted more into a space of helping the people in the region with democratic elections. So she changed her trajectory, found that that wasn't quite enough, and left and started Euphrates as an organization to really bridge the West and the East. Like, her understanding of what was happening in the Middle East felt really important. So this vision that she had grew into a small organization, initially, like I said, focused on the connection between the United States and the Middle East, but there were so many people that were interested in what she was doing. And it was interesting. Peace builders started to find her. So the peace builders started to find her and wanted to create this community of people that were willing to consider a different alternative to the violence and chaos they saw around them. So long story short, in 2019, we restructured. Janessa stayed a part of the organization, but took a step back a little bit. And we started this incredible flagship program called the Peace Practice Alliance. That's how I got to know Sarah. That's not the only way, but that's how I've gotten to know her better. Our first cohort, like you all have cohorts, our first cohort was in 2020. And now we have over 100 alumni in more than 40 countries around the world. And just to back up, just to be clear, our mission is to equip, connect, and uplift peace builders globally. So that's how I got to know Sarah as a peace builder and the work that she does with people in the Nepali community and people around the world, and just in her own community. She's truly a peace builder. So she's now a part of this. If you look really closely, you can find her picture in the 2023. She's a part of our alumni community with that last cohort just graduating this month in July. The practice of choosing peace is a practice that we embrace at Euphrates. That's our motto, is to inspire humanity to choose peace. And choosing peace begins with you, begins within. And this is kind of our, like a document that just explains our vision for what peace practice looks like. We believe that when we practice personal peace, we carry those practices into our interpersonal relationships. And then we engage and build these healthy, peaceful relationships, cultivating peaceful communities. And as we cultivate those communities, there's this critical mass, a movement of peace builders around the world that create and affect systemic change. So that's kind of what we're about. And it brings me to why we are gathered here today, why I am here, why Sarah asked me to present on communications. As leaders in your communities, as individuals in relationships, the ability to communicate effectively is so valuable. It's essential. I would say effective communication is one of the most, if not the most important soft skill we can learn. And there's two pieces that Euphrates focuses on when we talk about, when I think about communications. One is how we communicate with ourselves in the space we're in. So that's that personal peace practice. It's down at the bottom here in the blue. And I just pulled out, some more text about what it means to practice peace personally. These practices include mindfulness. I think you've done I think you all have had conversations on self-care and taking care of yourself, self-examination, spaces for reflection. Excuse me, that's the personal peace practice. So how we take care of ourselves, how we nourish ourselves. And then interpersonal peace practice is how we're in relationship with others, how we bring the practice of peace, the cultivation of peace into our relationships, whether it's your family relationships or your professional relationships, your community relationships. And this is what we're going to focus on today. The interpersonal peace practice is what we call it at Euphrates. And so it's what I'm going to call it today, just as we head into the conversation about listening. Interpersonal peace practice is a space to learn, understand, and embrace the experience of others. Practices include, and I highlighted here, or I bolded the words, deep listening, storytelling, nonviolent and compassionate communication, accountability, dialogue, creativity, negotiation, mediation, so much more. And I think what's interesting about the words that we already have embedded in our interpersonal peace practice conversation is that all of these involve communication. Deep listening is a form of communication. Storytelling is obviously nonviolent and compassionate communication. is a form of communication. Accountability is accountability in conversation. Dialogue, clearly, it's how we interact with one another, how we have meaningful conversations. Creativity is present in communication. And then obviously negotiation and mediation are specific practices, specific skills of communicating, how you build bridges, how you resolve conflict. I think what felt really important to me as I thought about what can I offer to this group was, as I said, the focus of active listening. What is the role of listening in communication? And as I thought about it, as I said earlier, I think it's just that essential soft skill that we all need to grow and cultivate. So listening indicates a person's ability to receive and interpret information in the communication process. So it's not just how we are talking to others, how we are sharing with others. It's how we are able to receive and interpret information, because communication is not one way, as you know, it's two ways. It's how we are listening and how we are sharing. And without active listening skills, you just are not going to be able to receive and interpret messages in an appropriate way that'll move a conversation forward, that'll add value to that conversation. Listening expands our knowledge. So on the intellectual level, the mind level, we become better thinkers when we are able to listen well. And it also takes us deeper. When we quiet our inner mind, our little talking head, I have one inside of me, I have little chitter chatters that go on inside my mind all the time. When we quiet that and listen really deeply, that is going to naturally enrich our communication. We become more open and our relationships are strengthened. I become more open-minded, I know, when I listen more deeply. And this is personally and professionally. So it's in your relationships with your family members, your household, and it's also in your professional environment. And don't we all just want healthier relationships? I think that feels like the thing that I'm always working on as a mother, as a sister, as a wife, as a partner at Euphrates. Like, what can I do to be to create more healthy relationships? So right now, I thought it would be fun for us to find out what kind of listeners we are. I've always thought of myself, like, since I was younger, I thought I'm a good listener. I don't interrupt. I don't necessarily cut people off, which isn't always totally true. My husband will let you know that I actually do interrupt often. I think of it as like, yes, Andy, I think of it as kind of overlapping in communication. But what I found out is there's so much more to being a good listener. It really comes down to being a good active listener. Turns out I was a good hearer. I could hear all the words and I could retain information in my mind and kind of repeat what you had said to me or follow directions really well. But I was a very average listener. So a good listener, what I've learned to discover, a good active listener is what I should really have on the slide, is someone who listens to the speaker to receive and interpret messages accurately. No one likes to communicate with a person who cares only about what they have to say. So to become a good communicator, we have to become good listeners too. Here is a fun thing to check out here. And I can't see the chat while I'm looking at my screen because I don't have two screens, but maybe you all want to pipe in on the chat and say if any of these things ring true to you. Do any of these patterns apply to you? In conversation, do you find yourself often interrupting others when they're talking? Do sometimes you talk when others are talking, maybe in a group setting? I know I'm at a group setting here at my summer camp where I like to support, and there's often a group conversation that I'm a part of, but I find myself over to the side whispering something based on maybe something I've heard, but like in that moment when I'm taking time to whisper to my neighbor, I'm not necessarily hearing what's happening. Do you jump to conclusions before somebody's finished speaking? Like, do you think, oh, I know what Hollister's going to say, so you just immediately like assume that you know what I'm going to say, how I'm going to finish a sentence, how I'm going to finish a thought? Do you have to ask people to repeat themselves? And I don't mean just for like, other languages. Of course, we often have to, or like if your hearing is diminished, or if there's a time when you can't hear something, it is important to ask others to repeat themselves. But do you find yourself doing that as a pattern because you're not listening? And when you're listening to somebody that maybe you're not on the same page with, Do you let your feelings towards the speaker come between you and your ability to listen? Do I already come into a room and imagine somebody, like if I've just met Sarah and I think I know everything about her because I've read about her, and so I have all these assumptions, am I actually really listening to how she is here in this moment? Or am I just listening to who I think she is and not really paying attention to the other elements of what's present in her actual communication? So we all have work to do to improve our listening skills. It's not going to happen overnight, but with a little practice, I think we can improve our active listening behaviors. So here's something fun. It's not, I don't know how well it's going to come across on the screen. This is a tool a resource that we offer in our Peace Practice Alliance program, the program that we run at Euphrates. And it's a graphic that is actually a long graphic. Like you scroll down start to finish, you'll see it's a sort of a flow chart. So on my screen, I had to cut it up because I can't really do a flow chart situation on a presentation on the slides. So you'll see, we're going to all start off together, and I'll just go through this very slowly so everybody has time to read what's in the different cues. In white and blue, you'll see things. So the white is the prompt, and then the blue is your answer. So the prompt is, if you're in the middle of something and someone wants to discuss an issue with you, what do you do? Do you give them full eye contact, or do you listen while doing something else? I've had a lot of relationships because I have young children who, well, they're not that young, but I have children who love to play games or work on technology devices are kind of present in our house a lot. So I can say, without a doubt, there's a lot of times when they say that they're listening to me, but there's definitely no eye contact. And they're definitely doing something else while they're listening. If it's whether it's being on a screen or actually just like not paying attention to me, involved in a different activity. So just think about that. Do you give full eye contact? Do you do something else while somebody's asking for your attention? So you'll see the trajectory. You'll see these little arrows. You can go down to which one you feel like you answered. If you're giving full eye contact, the next question that you want to ask yourself is, in a conversation, most of the time, your body language is what? Are you open? Are your arms unfolded? Or are you closed with your arms folded? So I know you all have talked about body language as something that's really important in communication. So something I have to really practice at, because I'm somebody who's cold easily. So I often find myself hunched up or like clutching myself. So I have to be very intentional when I'm in a group or one-on-one conversation that I'm removing my hands from my chest, folded chest, that I'm giving somebody my full eye contact and my full like body presence. So that's for that one, the left side. On the right side of the screen, you'll see the next cue is, if you do something else while somebody's talking to you, after the conversation has finished, do you repeat back to them the main point that they made, or do you immediately input your own opinion quickly? So sometimes as a form of agreement, you might immediately say yes and start giving your own opinion, or you might immediately say yes and kind of build off of what they said or repeat back what they've shared with you. So just think about that style. Like if somebody's talking, at the end of it, what do you do with that conversation? Do they feel acknowledged and heard by you? 2 more prompts at the top. Do you often find the need to fill any silence in conversations? One answer is no, I'm happy to wait. The next answer is yes, I jump right in with my thoughts. I was in a class with somebody once, and we were doing actually deep listening exercises. And what I learned is that my friend, her name was Jenny, was a very slow talker and needed a lot of space around all of her sentences. And I'm somebody who speaks very quickly and likes to immediately jump into conversation. And I had to very, like almost, I needed tape on my mouth almost. I had to be very intentional in being slow and just following her pace, not asking Jenny to come and match my pace, which was like more quick and less pauses. I needed to give her a lot of space around everything that she had to offer. So that's just one example. Like, do you all have friends or colleagues that need more space around their conversation? Do you mirror others' facial expressions for empathy? Often, hardly ever. And you'll see if you say hardly ever, that the arrow shoots you down to another prompt. But that's something that indicates that you're engaged in the communication, that you're engaged in listening. And some people do it excessively, right? I tend to take on people's mannerisms very quickly. But it allows somebody to feel that you're really in that conversation space with them. 2 more prompts. Do you focus fully on what others are telling you most of the time? Yes, I try to avoid forming my own thoughts until they've finished. Is that something, I mean, just consider it. Like, do I actually listen to the full expression of what somebody has to offer before forming my own opinions, or do I immediately jump to what I think? In a conversation, do you ask questions to probe further? One answer is yes, it helps them to explain. The other answer is nope, don't need to. So there's 2 ways you can approach that. Do I probe for more information, or do I ask somebody, do I just assume I know what they're saying? Here's 2 more, last two final prompts. If an awkward topic is raised, do you normally make them feel comfortable? Or do you move on to another topic? So there's lots of times, especially in I think some of you work in schools where you're gonna have maybe intimate or more conversation topics that are awkward, not necessarily comfortable. And do you immediately try to move away from them? Or something that is like, there's tension in it. There's something with conflict. Do you allow that conflict or that awkwardness to be present and just try to push through the conversation? Or do you try to change the subject, or try to figure out a way to get out of the conversation? So these are the final prompts. And if you do this exercise in its entirety as like a flow chart, all these little arrows lead you down to you're a great listener, you're an occasional listener, or your listening skills need work. So I think let's just briefly talk about your listening skills need work. I don't know all of you very well. But Sarah speaks so highly of you. I haven't heard her offer any negatives about people's ability to listen, but be honest with yourself. Are these things that you're challenged by? Do you embrace silence? Are you careful not to interrupt? So these are tips. If your listening skills still need work, pick a few things here that you can work on. Can you practice embracing silence? Can you practice not interrupting? Can you give your full attention without distraction? If you're an occasional listener, some cues here, some ideas, some prompts to help you think about how you are in the listening space is to ask instead of assume. So ask questions, don't just assume you understand what somebody is offering to you. Read their body, not their mind. We talked about that. Body language, look for facial cues, how they're holding themselves. Nonverbal cues are key in communication. I know you all have had that offered to you before. And then, of course, don't judge. Don't judge what others are saying. Don't form opinions before you're ready to engage in dialogue. Dialogue is a space that we don't do very often. We normally have conversations that are like transactional. You go back and forth, sharing each other's opinions. Maybe try a conversation where you're just listening. And then if you're a great listener, always room for improvement. You're working to understand their perspective, and you share your own experiences, you listen to their experience. Something that's key that I've learned is being a parent and somebody who works from home, I am interrupted often. And my husband, my partner, works from home also. So he is somebody also who will interrupt me, and vice versa. So it's a great practice to find a way to let somebody know gently that you want to hear what they have to say, you're interested, but maybe now it's not the right time. You can possibly talk to them in 15 minutes or this evening, or can we go on a walk later? Like, just find a way to politely decline the space for the conversation right now if you know you're not able to give your full self. I think, as I said, we all have work to do. So these are just opportunities for us to improve our skills. And I don't think these things happen overnight, but I think if you pick a couple things to work on, every day as a practice, we talk about peace practices. It's a practice, it's not a perfection of it. But if we work on these thought patterns, these communication patterns a little bit every day, I just think everybody has the ability to blossom into a truly active listener and therefore a better communicator. I'm going to stop sharing for a second just to take a temperature check in the room, see how everybody's doing, see if anybody has any questions before we go on to the next section, which is just talking about the 3 levels of listening, what 3 levels are that we're going to explore together. So if anybody has any questions, if you don't, that's okay too, but I've talked a lot for like almost 30 minutes straight or 20 minutes straight. So I feel like I want to give you all a little space if any questions are coming up about listening or anything else. I'm going to take a quick drink. That's either good news or I don't know. I'm going to take it as good news. There's no questions. The next part of our conversation, which doesn't feel like a conversation, is a little bit one way right now, but that's okay. I know it. I know that's what I'm here for. I know I'm here for the workshop. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free to you can even cut me off right when I'm talking, even though we're talking about interruption as a bad thing in this space, I've got a screen in front of me and I can't see your faces. So if you raise your hand or try to talk, I won't be able to hear it, but feel free to interject if you need to. I won't count it as an interruption. It'll be an interjection. Hold on, my screen messed up. I am going to share my screen again. And I need to change something on there. That's it. Here we go. It's back. So I thought, as I was reviewing in our program, as I said, the Peace Practice Alliance, we have this really concentrated section. For a whole month, we spend time talking about the interpersonal relationships and how we can be effective communicators, good listeners, all these different skill sets to really improve all relationships. And there's this great resource by the Barefoot Guide, and it talks about listening at 3 levels. And the 3 levels are head, heart, and feet. And feet doesn't make too much sense, but as you walk through this with me, you'll see how feet begin to make sense. The head is listening from the head is the thinking level. This is the space where we are listening to thoughts. We are taking in facts. We are like hearing the specific words and ideas and the principles behind them. The second part is listening for the heart. That's the feeling level. So that's the space where we were just talking about being a good listener, where you're paying attention to nonverbal cues. You're kind of listening into feelings and emotions, mood, and all the experience behind these. So you're listening from a different space, kind of to the whole person's presence. Listening for the feet is that's how they describe it. That's the will level. This is the space where we're able to pick up somebody's intentions, their energy, the direction they're going, what their motivations are, their will. So listening for the feet is what sometimes helps move a conversation forward. So all of these in active listening, all of these things are present. We're listening to words, we're listening from the heart, and we're listening for intention. So when we're challenged when we challenge ourselves to listen at these 3 levels, we also will find that we begin to express ourselves more clearly. So as you're listening in these ways, you're also going to be able to share out more effectively in these ways. The thinking level is the most obvious space, right? Because you take in information. So can we truly follow our own thoughts, the thoughts of the speaker? What happens is when you're scientifically, I'm putting that in quotes because I'm not a scientist and this isn't my study, but we think faster than we speak. So your thoughts are coming very quickly, but the words don't come out very as fast. So when somebody else is talking, the same thing is happening. I'm hearing the words that you're saying, but I actually have extra space in my consciousness. And what am I doing with that? So I'm hearing your words, but I'm processing, and my thoughts are happening faster even than your words are. So do we use this extra mental time to build a picture and digest what we're hearing, to listen more deeply? Or do we use this time to think our own separate thoughts, to construct hasty replies? So, sometimes when you're listening to somebody and you're taking that time to formulate what you're going to say next. I do that a lot. I find myself to be somebody who practices active listening, but because I do that, I notice the times when I'm engaged in a conversation and I'm immediately already trying to think of what I'm going to say back. So how often do we have to call ourselves back from a daydream or a rehearsal of what we're going to say next and reply to the speaker? I don't tend to daydream quite as much as I do rehearse what I'm going to say next. Maybe you're somebody who daydreams more or gets distracted by some other scene in the space where you're having a conversation. So in the thinking level, just to recap, this is the most obvious way to listen. It's the listening process is supported on this level by the cultivation of a genuine interest in where the other person is coming from. So in this space, we want to have an open mind, an approach that doesn't judge the words, that doesn't make up my own doesn't lean into my own preconceptions, form opinions, and then repeat back what I think. So am I really listening? The next level is the feeling level. So listening to feelings gives us an important clue about what really matters. Oops, sorry, when I have to go back. When I'm listening to you, I understand what you're feeling, and I can hear your strongly expressed or strongly denied feelings. So sometimes, how sometimes things are being said without the words coming out that's saying them. So I can really feel what you're thinking about and what you're trying to communicate to me. And that's super helpful to get to some maybe key issues that are behind what somebody's saying. Sometimes we say things but we mean something different. And so if you're a good active listener, you can probably help move the conversation and the communication in a direction where you really get to what's important right now for us to have a conversation about. Listening at this level means going a step deeper into the speaker's experience. This is where empathy comes in. So you may find that to truly be an empathic listener, you're going to need to listen to the tone of the voice. You're going to have to watch for facial expressions, gestures. That's where you're going to really get to what's being said. It's like the words, it's like the feelings behind the words. In this space, eyes are really important because we have two ears, but we also have two eyes to take in information. So we're listening with our ears, but we're also taking in information with our eyes, these nonverbal cues that we were talking about. And we talked about silence. Silence is actually really important to listen to, which sounds interesting, right? Like, how do you listen to silence? But the way somebody's communicating, the spaces where there are intentional pauses or pauses when somebody doesn't know what to do, there's still something to listen to in that space. When we calm our own reactions and override our sensitive listening, so meaning when we are able to kind of put aside our thinking and feeling, we really are going to develop that quality of empathy because we're really deeply listening into what somebody else is sharing. This means empathy really means that we're putting ourselves into the speaker's place. You've heard perhaps the expression have you, walk a mile in my shoes, or why don't you come to my, basically coming to somebody's side and seeing their perspective. And I took a class maybe 15 years ago. And one of the things that we talked about in the listening space, which I found so helpful, and I use it all the time, especially in parenting, is the idea of pulling in beside somebody to listen so you can really see their view. And that's just going to radically change how you communicate and how you're in relationship with others. Can I actually pull up right next to you and see the same view that you're seeing? I can't ever be in your shoes. I can't ever have your exact same life experience, but I can pull in right next to you and really take in something from your point of view, which will often help resolve conflict or any kind of tension that's in the space. It's just such an essential skill, especially for negotiation or solving problems. And we all have problems to solve in our conversations, disagreements, whether they're in family relationships or professional environments. So really can't emphasize enough the ability to cultivate that practice of empathic, active listening. The will level is something that is so interesting to me because it's not something that I've thought about. Once I got introduced to that, I'm like, oh, okay, I think I understand this. The will is that energy or that intention that you're bringing to conversation. And so if you're able to listen in the thinking and then in the heart space, right? In the head and the heart space, the will space is that space where you're using those two levels to also get into understand what somebody's intentions are. So to read a person's or a group, because sometimes it's in a group's sense of will or intention, it enables our ability to work effectively, We can sense the real intentions of another person, what they want, and what they're telling me or not telling me. And that's really difficult to do, but it's crucial to the art of really good active listening. Often speakers are themselves are maybe only aware of what they want on the surface level. So skillful listening can actually help somebody else discover what their intentions are, what their desire is, kind of like if you're listening at that level, you can get them into the feeling space of how they're communicating. So it's a beautiful space to be in, a space where you can perceive somebody's intentions, what they really want in the conversation. You can sometimes ask really key questions or make comments that will help draw more information out. More information you get, the better communication that's happening. These hidden levels are sources of potential energy, like things that haven't been spoken. So it speaks to what's maybe not been said yet. And if we can hold back our way of acting in the situation and look for elements of commonality, mutual understanding, are there things that we agree on and understand and experience together, then we'll be able to open the way towards resolution and cooperation and collaboration. And so many conversations kind of have that need, especially in positions of leadership that you all are either in or striving to be in. You're going to have to become a good problem solver, and to become a good problem solver and a good collaborator, somebody who works well with others. This skill of active listening is like absolutely essential. So based on these three levels, and I can't see you all as I remind you, but if you want to take off your mic, tell me which side of the screen looks like it's effective listening and which side of the screen looks like it's ineffective listening. So is effective listening in blue or orange? And is ineffective listening in blue or orange? And basically on the left, you'll see this is what the speaker says, and this is how the speaker has a thought, a feeling, and an intention, and this is how the listener processes it. So in the blue, it's the listener hears with a closed mind. In attention, the listener pays attention in the feeling space to their own likes and dislikes, and there's a sense of distrust. In the intention space, you're stuck often in the my way of thinking, so there's more disagreement. That's the blue. On the orange side, the speaker's thoughts, the listener hears. So the speaker is offering information and the listener hears with an open mind and has a great understanding. In this particular chart, it says understands the past. So they have the ability to listen to all the details, not just maybe what's present in that moment. In the feeling space, the feeling level of listening, there's empathy and sensitivity to the present. So you're present with what they're feeling and expressing right now here. In the intention space, the will space, the feet space, then that's where you'll find cooperative attitude towards the future. So it's a way to move the conversation forward, and there's a sense of understanding. I feel like it's pretty obvious, but if anybody want to take a stab at what they think is the effective side, is it blue or orange?
Ma'am, I think effective is orange one.
Yes, so right. It seems a little bit obvious, but it felt like this is a good way for us to just pay attention to like a summary of what it means to be an effective listener. And by effective listener, it also means an active listener, which is really the point of what we were talking about today. With that, I think if we have time and if we feel good about it, I don't know how everybody's connection is. I thought we might want to do a listening exercise, an experiential exercise. And to lead us into that, there's this beautiful quote about empathy. Empathy is our innate ability to be with the feelings and needs in ourselves and others. Giving empathy, we are simply returning us all to life as it is. Empathy can only occur when our preconceived ideas and judgments are put aside, and there is an openness to serving as witness to someone else's experience. And what a gift you are giving somebody if you can just be a witness to their experience. I'm going to offer to you this screen, and then I'm going to turn my stop sharing and ask you all if you think it would be helpful to, like, if it's possible to do like a little breakout of a couple groups for people taking turns listening to each other. So the way this exercise would work, and then we're going to come back and like kind of read the room and see if everybody is able to do this. In this exercise, you're either partnered up or you'll be in rooms with 3 people, and you'll take turns sharing, and each person can get 3 to 5 minutes to share. And you can talk about something that's happening in your current personal life, in your professional life. You can tell a story, you can talk about a challenge, or you can talk about a new discovery. It really can be anything that you want. And if you're not somebody who talks a lot, if you only want to talk for 3 minutes, that's okay. But give yourself about 3 to 5 minutes to share. And while they're sharing, the speaker can, the listener cannot speak unless they're asking clarifying questions or saying something like, tell me more or tell me why. So this is option 1. Option 1 is for us to do a listening partner exercise that explores that. Option 2, if we don't feel like we have the right connection right now to break everybody into breakout rooms, would be for us to have a conversation with a prompt. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to ask the 9 of you here in this room what feels like would be best for this conversation space now. Would you like to do a listening partner exercise, or would you like to have a conversation with a prompt that I have for you all? And whoever speaks up gets to vote. That's what happened at camp. I told you I'm at camp right now. It's the campers who tell me what they want. That's what they're the ones that end up getting what they want. Anyone? I think because there's just a few of us here, and because I'm thinking of this being a call recording and we only have 10 minutes left, I think what might be a good idea is for us to just consider a prompt right now. And then also this benefits for those of you watching this video on YouTube. You all can benefit possibly from this part of the conversation. And the prompt is simple. The prompt is for you to spend 1 minute considering all the relationships you've had in your life, and think about a time, a moment, or a person, either a person who's been a really good listener in your life, or a moment when you've really felt heard and understood. So maybe we can all take a minute just to kind of think about, like, hopefully everybody has had an experience where they felt heard and they felt listened to by a friend or a family member or somebody at work. And then we can just share from from that. And I have examples, but I would love to hear your voices, because again, I've been talking a lot. So let's take a minute to consider that, and then I'll unmute and invite you all to share. All right, it's been about a minute. So I'm going to invite those of you who are still with us to unmute yourself if you have an idea or an example that you want to share, an insight. Again, if your camera and mic are not available, that's okay. And if you'd like to use the chat room, that's great too. Does anybody have an example of a time where somebody has deeply listened to you, and or an example of a person in your life that you find to be a really good listener that you can use as like a mentor, an example for how you want to listen better?
Okay, ma'am, can I say?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm actually a like average listener. Sometimes I listen, but sometimes like my mind always runs to conclusion, like you said before.
Yeah.
And I want to give example of my husband. He's a very good listener. Like he actually listens to my feelings, but when it is his turn, then I always like interrupt, and I always try to control him and try to say him this and that. And like actually I have learned from him also, and he also said tells me that be a good listener. And at that point I realized that listening and hearing are different. Means to focus on one thing, but hearing means we can hear so many noises at one time, but listening means just focusing on one thing. This I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's great that you have a husband, a partner that is a good listener and a good
Yes,
example. Yeah, we can all learn from each other.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you for giving the opportunity.
Mhm. Does anybody else have a good example of somebody that they know is a good listener, or an experience they've had where you felt very heard? I would love to have one more example before we bring our time together to a close, if anybody would like to unmute. I will not call on you because I don't know you well enough to call on you. If I knew you better, I probably would.
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Nice to hear you.
Here.
Yes.
Actually, I want to share something. I know my uncle, who is the good example of good listener. Sorry, I am a little bit confused how to interact with people, so that I think this channel will be helpful. Sorry for this. I don't know.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
I have an example of my uncle who used to listen to us whenever we talk about something. He just listened to us carefully, and whenever, whatever the things, and reply is so easily whenever the solution is required. Thanks. That's all.
Thank you. No, that's important. I mean, it's nice that you have an example, and I like how you said it allows solutions to come forward. You know, it's sometimes you can tell if somebody's listened well. There's not always resolutions in conversations, and not all conversations need resolutions or something to be solved, but if a solution comes forward from it, usually good active listening has been present in that conversation. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share before we close? I'm trying to be good about honoring silence, because that's one of the things with active listening that you do, is that you allow a space of quiet. So I'm trying not to rush us to the conclusion, and just instead provide you all more space if you do have something to share.
Hello, ma'am. I want to add something.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. And as a student of environment science and as a research intern working at SARC Secretariat, and we used to meet with lots of diplomats, and we have to work with them in terms of research and in terms of lots of conference that is a student environment and climate activist, and most of the time we have lots of conversation regarding climate change, and we have to involve in conversation that mean relate with conference, and we have to conduct a workshop and training for the youth, for the student in school and college, in school and also in college. And that time most of our mentors who used to guide us in our research, in our college, they used to guide us like that. They used to say that like if we speak less and listen more, then we can learn more. And most of the time we like youth and want to ourselves more, and we don't have that practice, that we are not being able to listen more from others. Most of the time we used to keep our opinion in front of diplomats and the people, and this might be not good. And that's why they used to tell us like if we have knowledge, if we feel that we are knowledgeable person, then we have to listen more and speak less to be successful on our field. So yeah, this is my part.
You've gotten some great instruction. Thank you for sharing. And it's nice to hear that that's what's being shared in that space of climate activism and environmental work. That's so important for us to listen, because there's so many sides to consider when we're considering the health of our planet and directions that we're trying to take. So I love knowing that that's what's been present, and that your mentors have offered to you that value of listening before speaking, and using more time to listen and less time to speak, I feel like is always a good thing. Well, we just have about a minute left, so I just want to take time to say thank you to everybody. I am very grateful that Sarah asked me to do this, and it helped me where I am professionally in my work at Euphrates, and it also helped me in the work where I am right now, as I've referenced several times, the summer camp where I am right now, because I'm in constant conversation and relationship. And so the reminder of the value of good listening is never lost on me. And I hope that from the presentation today, from the different exercises that are, the activities that we went through in the presentation, I hope that there were some new ideas that you were able to take away, some practices that you are able to pull out and find a way to immediately infuse them into your relationships that you have. Very few of us live on a mountaintop by ourselves. Most of us need to be in relationship with others. So hopefully some of what was offered today can benefit you as people, as friends, sisters, brothers, mothers, aunts, uncles, whatever your role is in personal relationships and whatever your role is professionally. Hopefully some of these listening tools you'll be able to take and practice immediately and just create more just healthier relationships and more nourished forms of communication. So with that, I'm just going to say thank you and wish everybody a wonderful evening, afternoon, or morning, wherever you're calling in from, and let you know that I am currently in the works with Sarah to plan her next trip to Nepal is in October, and I'm currently working on a plan to join her, and hopefully some of you will be present in her workshops or activities that she's doing, and I'll get to be able to meet you all face to face, and we'll be able to embrace that superpower of diminishing time and space so we're all in the same room together. Maybe that'll actually happen in October for me. So thank you so much, and I'm going to stop recording, and if any